Joining me now, former ambassador and current advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister, Mark Regev. Mr. Ambassador, it's good to have you back on the program. Is this a serious discussion? What is it going to take for this to happen?
Well, serious or not, we'll only have to see how this plays out. But it's clear that if the negotiations have entered a more serious stage, it's because Israel has been beefing up the pressure on Hamas. They're not suddenly going to become humanitarians. They're not suddenly going to become people who have a moral conscience. These are the most brutal bunch of killers that we know. We saw the violence and the atrocities that they committed on October 7th. We know how they treat their own people, how they treat the people of Gaza. So we have no illusions. But I think by beefing up the pressure, especially the military pressure, it's possible that we're going to start getting our people out. But and I have nothing to announce at this stage, and I would think we have to be cautious.
I think there's always caution when we're talking about Hamas, a terrorist organization that, as you say, is known to be brutal killers. But is there another aspect of this? Is this also the result of not just the U.S., but also the G7 and worldwide pressure on Israel? And is it an acknowledgement that the humanitarian situation is horrendous and Israel needs to be part of dealing with that situation?
So that's a separate issue. It's not related to the talks that might succeed on release of hostages. Of course, we want them to succeed. But our decision has been as follows. We are relentlessly pursuing Hamas. They are our enemy. They're a brutal enemy, and we will fight them and we will take apart their military machine.
But is a 3-day pause as part of that, it may end up with the release of some hostages, but I'm talking specifically about the 3-day pause to allow for some humanitarian aid to get in. I can't go into those reports, but from our perspective, humanitarian aid can go in now. I was saying in parallel to our campaign against Hamas, we are for expediting as much humanitarian aid as is possible. The crossing in Rafah that separates Gaza from Egypt is open. The humanitarian zone there in the south is receiving internally displaced people. We've got field hospitals there. There's a new field hospital on the Egyptian side of the frontier as well. The French are bringing a ship. From Israel's perspective, there are no limitations whatsoever on food going in, on medicine going in, on water going in. The humanitarian effort should go ahead irregardless of what else happens. But the fact is, more airstrikes hit civilians in the southern region today. The UN says up to 15,000 people are doing what Israel is telling them, moving south, and yet there are still airstrikes. Can you guarantee the security of the Palestinians who are doing what the Israeli government is recommending they do? Because so far it hasn't worked. So I wouldn't say it hasn't worked. I would say it's work in progress. You have to know that today there were missiles fired from the southern part of the Gaza Strip into Israeli communities, so we respond to that fire. But that's not in the area of the humanitarian zone. The humanitarian zone is what our people on the ground are saying.
No, there's a humanitarian zone on the western edge of the Gaza Strip there in the south, close to the Rafah crossing, close to the coast. It's a specified area. There's not a Hamas infrastructure there. And from our perspective, that's the safest place to be in the Gaza Strip. And that's where we're urging people to go. And the truth is, literally hundreds of thousands of Gazans have voted with their feet. They know that this is a safer place to be. It's out of harm's way. And that's where people should go.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken, sir, just made waves in Israeli media at the G7 summit, a day after Prime Minister Netanyahu said Israel will oversee security on the Strip after the war. Blinken very directly warned Israel against doing just that. Let me play it for you.
No forcible displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. Not now, not after the war. No use of Gaza as a platform for terrorism or other violent attacks. No reoccupation of Gaza after the conflict ends. No attempt to blockade or besiege Gaza. No reduction in the territory of Gaza.
He ticked off a laundry list of must-haves, including Palestinian governments, Gaza unified with the West Bank under the Palestinian Authority, and a pathway to a two-state solution. What is your reaction to Secretary Blinken's very pointed comments?
So there's a lot there we agree with, that we're in lockstep with Washington. We don't want to reoccupy Gaza. We don't want to rule over the people of Gaza. We don't want to be the sovereign there. On the contrary.
What did Benjamin Netanyahu mean when he said a security presence?
He was talking about that when this is over and we've destroyed Hamas, we have to be willing, it's not like we're learning from the mistakes of others. You don't go in there and topple a regime and just leave. That's a mistake. We have to make sure that there's ongoing security commitment to prevent a residual Hamas or other terrorist groups from filling the vacuum. And we do it, because we have to keep our people safe. We don't want to get back to a situation where we have terrorists in Gaza who are coming across the border and killing our people. But that's not political control. That's a security envelope to ensure that we don't see a resurgence of terrorism. I think that's common sense, is it not?
Ambassador Mark Regev, many more conversations that we can and I'm sure we'll have. Thank you for coming on the program.